Thank you, Michelle. I'm delighted to introduce Susan. Suzanne has been a role model for me for 15 years and for many since she joined the League over 50 years ago. Over the years, she's been active in many of the projects undertaken by the League and its advocacy efforts. One such project, begun about 5 years ago, is Fair Districts PA, the movement which set out to change the way the redistricting of the state's legislative and congressional districts is conducted. Despite Herculean efforts by Sue and thousands of volunteers working to pass legislation which would create a process that was fair and nonpartisan, we discovered that our work would ultimately fail because of the rules that govern the way the state legislature did its business. From this experience was born the Fix Harrisburg project, in which Sue has been actively involved. In our local league, as a scientist and scientific writer, she became the Pittsburgh's League's first tech guru. She was instrumental in helping us get online with our interactive voters guide, website, and social media. In addition, she edited our outstanding league newsletter, The Voter, for the past 12 years. Sue served as president of the local league more than once and also served on the state Pennsylvania League board. Sue was the Pittsburgh League president and my first mentor and friend when I arrived in Pittsburgh from California 15 years ago. She soon recruited me to the board on learning that I was familiar with the California Online Voters Guide. It is my great pleasure to pass the mic to Sue Broughton.
Excuse me, Sue, I would be remiss in not introducing our interpreter for this evening. I apologize for interrupting. Heather Gray is our interpreter. She will be interpreting for anyone in the deaf community who may have joined us. Excuse me, Eileen. So sorry.
Okay, I guess I'm on, right?
Yes, you're on, Sue. Sorry, I should have told you.
I'm delighted to do this, and this presentation is sort of a luxury for me because you've given me an hour and a half, and most of the groups that I've done this for haven't been so generous. So I might wander a bit. And are any old-time members of the League that haven't seen me for a long time? I understand if you don't really recognize me because I've started growing my hair. I don't look like I used to. Okay, let's see. Let me start by sharing my screen and let's see if we can get this to work. That should be it. Okay, now. And let me put this in slide mode. Okay, now can everybody see that as a full screen? Does that look okay, Michelle or Eileen or whoever?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay,
good.
Thank you. Okay, we have a lot of new members in the League, and since I do have the luxury of more time than I've had in a number of presentations, I'm going to start by reviewing just a bit of what we did in gerrymandering, because as Eileen said, that's how we got here to figuring out what we need to do in order to get anything done in the state legislature. So this is what I hope my presentation will pretty much follow. I'll do that. I'll spend a very brief time on what Harrisburg legislature is supposed to look like. I will spend considerably more time on what it really looks like. I want to talk about some examples of stalled bills that really should not have been stymied by the rules. And in fact, I have more information on that than I did a day ago. I was still editing this, well, I stopped editing this slide presentation at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. because there has been more information out of fair districts. Then I want to talk about fixing it and what we can do next. And again, that's something that's in a state of flux. We've got a month to do something about it. And the strategy is still in a state of flux. So we'll see how that might go. Okay, where did we start? Well, this is certainly where I started. And I think it's where a lot of people started in the 2012 election. Some of us, many of us, noticed that the Democratic Party got a majority of votes, a fair majority, but a majority. But 72% of the seats were won by the Republicans. It was 13 seats to 5 seats. And that just did not seem to be representative of Pennsylvania. And some of us started looking into that. I actually started back then, but I really didn't do very much about it until 2016, when Carol Cunningham, who was then a year into the Fair Districts Pennsylvania group, came to Pittsburgh and started recruiting Western Pennsylvanians to get into the act. So a little bit about redistricting. In Pennsylvania, redistricting, we don't do anything simply in Pennsylvania, I think sometimes. Redistricting for Congress has done in a completely different process than redistricting for the state legislature. For Congress, it's just done by a regular bill that passes through the regular legislative process. So the majority party draws the maps the way they want them, attaches them to a bill, and sends it through the legislature to the governor. Now, back in 2012, that was a slam dunk. The legislature and the governor's office were all controlled by the same party. That's not the same now, and it hasn't been. So we'll see. Or what we have seen. For the state legislature, in 1968, the Pennsylvania Constitution was revised. And this process that I'm going to talk about a little later in the presentation was put into the Pennsylvania Constitution. That's somewhat different. It is very different from just passing a bill. So the schedule generally is that the census is held in the year ending in 0. Redistricting to take account of the changes in population and population shifts is done in the year ending in 1, and the first elections to the new districts, the year ending in 2, a process that we've just been through. There is nothing new about gerrymandering. It goes back to 1812 when a governor, Elbridge, I think it was a hard G, Gary, approved a bill that favored his party. Well, this says the map looked like, somebody thought the map looked like a salamander. I think it was intended to look like a monster. Look at the head and the wings. But anyhow, the idea of a salamander stuck, and the term gerrymander was invented, and it's never gone away. It wasn't that much of a problem. Well, because people didn't have the tools to really draw accurate maps and to split townships, split municipalities, even split districts. But now they do. And computers use mapping technology and data mining capabilities to very precisely gerrymander districts. So the problem has gotten a lot worse. This is, I can't call it my favorite gerrymander, but this is the one that I have used since I started giving presentations in early 2017. To just give you an idea of 1 or 2 ways to gerrymander, and there are actually, I would say, 4 ways to gerrymander. So over on the left, now let's see, is my pointer going to show? Okay, I think so. I think you can see that. This is district 12, Congressional District 12, as it was in 2017. What happened to my pointer? There it is. It's a fairly compact district. It's nowhere near the city of Pittsburgh, which is 14 and 18, parts of it anyhow. It covers the counties of Armstrong, Indiana, Cambria, and Somerset, and parts of Westmoreland and Fayette County. It's a long way. It's certainly a long way from the Ohio border. Along comes the 2000 redistricting. Let me go back here and look at District 20. There is a Democrat representing District 20, and there is another Democrat representing District 12. And what the majority party at that point would like to do is to set up a primary contest. So they pull District 12 all the way over into Greene County, which is represented by a guy named Mascara, but leave it also up here. Johnstown is about there, setting up that primary. John Murtha, who represents Cambria 12, wins that primary, and they have one way of gerrymandering is to just eliminate a Democrat or eliminate somebody. The next redistricting in 2011, now they really don't need this part here. They figured out that by pulling District 18 down there and 9 over here, they can keep their representatives there. What they'd really like to do is to eliminate District 4 from 2001. I live, whoops, sorry, don't want to do that. Let's do this. I live about here. So that affected me personally. 4 was represented by Jason Altmeyer, who was as moderate Democrat as there ever was. And Murtha was no longer alive. He had died in 2011. No, he had died in 2010. And his seat was taken by one of his staff members, Mark Christ. So now we have a primary here. Christ wins, but he has to to win that primary, he has to sort of veer further left. And when he tries to veer back toward the center to win the general election, he can't. And then there's another factor in this, why he can't, because if all of you will look at this little squiggle that goes up from District 14, if you think about it, figure out where that might be, that's the Allegheny River Valley, which, while it doesn't have much left anymore, once had a lot of industry, a couple of power plants, and those were all union jobs, and union members tend to vote Democratic. So what they did was to take all of these voters and pack them. This is called packing. Pack them into District 14, where their votes don't mean anything, because District 14 is a city and it's going to vote Democratic no matter what. Whereas if those votes had stayed up here, they might actually have had an impact on how this district went. So in the general election, it was won by Republican Keith Rothfuss. So that's one example that really shows some very creative districting, but not very ethical, in my opinion. Okay. When you consider a district in Congress, you're considering one district out of 425. You don't have that much influence. So I should say that at this point in time, since the majority in Congress is going to, in the House of Representatives, is going to be very slim, one district does make a difference. But when you redistrict the state legislature, you're looking for control of the whole enchilada. I mean, either that the whole not the whole legislature, but one house is going to be controlled by one party or the other. And this little video, which I did not have the last time I spoke about this to most people, I got this very recently, explains how to gerrymander a state legislature in under 2 minutes. I think it runs 1 minute and 54 seconds. So I'm going to turn this on and let you listen to this.
Partisan redistricting or gerrymandering is about fractions.
Oops. And then just let me do one thing here. No, I don't think it. Was the voice on that loud enough? when I
Yes,
stopped?
it was. It was good. It was
Okay.
good.
Let's go this.
Partisan redistricting or gerrymandering is about fractions, percentages. These coins represent voters in an evenly divided state, 50 dimes, 50 pennies. They elect 10 representatives. That means each district map must contain 10 coins. Of course, real people don't live in neat rows, so let's mix them up. This is our hypothetical state. Let's see what happens if the dimes draw the maps, 10 coins in each district. So first thing we do is pack the pennies, give them 2 safe districts, but pack them solid. The remaining 8 districts are won by the dimes, by smaller but still comfortable margins. The dimes win 8 districts and the pennies win 2. The dimes overwhelmingly control the legislature. Of course, if the pennies drew the district lines, the opposite could happen. Let's rig it for the pennies. For the pennies, we pack the dimes into 2 safe districts and crack the remaining 8 districts and win by the same margin, 8-2. Well, now that we've destroyed democracy, let's consider how this would look if the maps were drawn based on compactness and keeping communities of interest together. You get evenly divided districts in an evenly divided state. There are some that go heavily dime, there are some that go penny, but that's to be expected. People live where they live, and that's what democracy is about. It's not about party bosses rigging elections for them.
So there you have it. I said that the process for redistricting the state legislature in Pennsylvania is laid out in the Pennsylvania Constitution, and it is. And it's interesting. First of all, Section 16 tells you how many districts there will be. So you're not dealing with losing or gaining a district. It's always the same. And then it says, unless absolutely necessary, no county, city, incorporated town, borough, township, or ward, but let's think for a minute about county, shall be divided in forming one of these districts. Section 17 tells you how to do it. And the state legislature as a whole and the governor have nothing to do with this. There is a 5-person commission. 4 of them are the party leaders in the 2 houses of the legislature, the majority and minority leader in the Senate and the majority and minority leader in the House. So that's going to be 2 of each party. Then there has to be a chair. Who shall be the chair, the chairman, or the chair of the committee. And the 4 party leaders are supposed to agree on that person. Well, in the however many decades it is, 6 or whatever, since 1968, to my knowledge, they've only managed to agree once. What generally happens is that the chair is selected by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And in 2010, or 2011, That was, again, the Republicans not only controlled both houses of the legislature and the governorship, they also controlled the Supreme Court. So that was an invitation to gerrymander the state legislature, which happened. This time, when they couldn't agree, and they interviewed, these party leaders interviewed 30-something people, 33. I sat through all of those. There were some extremely qualified people that they could have chosen, but they didn't. And I think the Supreme Court didn't expect them to, because they were primed and ready. And they selected I would say, extremely neutral person. And that was, I think you all know probably, Mark Nordenberg from the University of Pittsburgh, ex-chancellor. And the process went a bit differently. So going back to the 2011, when it was really gerrymandered, this is an example of what might happen. Look at Butler County. The line is sort of like this. How many districts or parts of districts are there in Butler County? Well, there are 7. 2 districts are wholly within the county, and the other 5 wander through all of these counties, everything pretty much except Clarion that borders up, which means that all of these counties have been split, including Butler. That is to say that the commission has routinely ignored the Pennsylvania Constitution. So that's a bit about gerrymandering. It's a very short bit. I could talk about gerrymandering for an hour and have on many occasions, but it gives you an idea of what it was that we were trying to correct. So how should Harrisburg work? Well, what it should produce is a representative democracy that does several things. First of all, it's efficient and cost effective. And it's responsive to the people. And it's productive. It actually gets something done. If it satisfied those 4 things, we would have a legislature that we could be proud of. But it doesn't. This is how it should work. Somebody sees a problem and has an idea for a bill that would correct it. The bill is drafted in whichever chamber the idea originated. It has committee hearings, hopefully, and having some public input, consulting some experts on whatever the subject is. If it is voted out of committee, some bills might reasonably die in committee. But if it's voted out of committee, what's happening here? It should go to floor debate. And if it passes, it should go to the second chamber, which should do the same thing, have some committee hearings, floor debate. And if it passes, it should go to the governor, who either signs it, lets it become law without his signature, vetoes it, or if there's amendments in the second chamber, it goes back and through the process. It's complex, but it's reasonable. Okay, what really happens? Any one of, and this is where the title of this presentation came from, any one of 6 majority party leaders can single-handedly block any bill. Now that's not exactly 6 people. And I'll show you in a bit. They can do this regardless of the support of the rest of the legislature or public support, doesn't matter. A House committee chair, that probably should be listed 3rd, but and that's why there aren't exactly 6, because there are several committees and each of them has a chair. So it's basically 6, the holders of any one of 6 offices. the House Majority Leader, because if the committee approves a bill and the House Majority Leader doesn't like it, that person should simply not bring it up for a floor vote. And there's the Speaker of the House who appoints the House committee, the committee chairs, and also keep it from coming to the floor. And in the Senate, it's the same thing. The committee chairs, Senate Majority Leader, and the Senate President pro tempore, who has the real power of leading the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor's role in the Senate is sort of ceremonial to conduct the meetings some of the time. The real power resides in the President pro tempore. Okay, how does this happen? This is really interesting. The first day of a session, of a new session, the party leaders introduce a resolution containing the rules. This is a fairly hefty document because there's actually a lot of rules. And the ones that we're concerned about aren't the whole thing. There are rules that govern even minor stuff. So this is several pages that nobody has seen. They don't send it out in advance. They don't send it out after the election to the people who won. So they have maybe a month to look at it. They don't do any of that. They just hand it out. They don't even vote on it right then. They table that resolution. Why? Because they then introduce another resolution, which I'll call Resolution 2. And Resolution 2 is very simple. Resolution 2 says, Resolution 1 may not be amended. Okay. They passed that resolution because everybody votes for it. Now, why the majority, the mass of legislators do that is a complex thing. New members really don't know what they're doing. Ones who've been there for a while have seen the power of the leadership and don't want to buck it for one reason or another. I mean, for whatever reason, they passed that resolution. So then they take Resolution 1 off the table, which now cannot be amended because of Resolution 2, and they pass that. And they have rules that govern the House or the Senate. Both chambers do that for the next couple of years. And basically, they accumulate all the power. And what does this mean? Well, the majority parties have written, leaders have written these rules. The rules have the majority leaders select the committee chairs. The committee chairs control the committee agendas, and all bills go to a committee. So they either die there or they are considered and passed out of committee. That means that one majority party leader who represents less than 0.5% of Pennsylvania voters, at least in the House, because there are 203 districts, can ignore, block, or gut any bill, regardless of its support with the rest of the legislature or with the voters. A leader representing 0.5% of Pennsylvania voters. So does your local legislature really have any influence? Well, it's not terribly surprising, I guess, politics being what it is, that the minority party legislators really don't have any say about which bills get a vote. But what is, I think, surprising, or what I think people don't realize, that is That is that the majority party legislators, the ones that are not in the leadership, which is most of them, also have no say about which bills get a vote. And I don't think that a lot of people have thought about that. If majority party person runs for the legislature, they think they'll have some influence. A good example locally is Hal English. I don't know whether that's a familiar name, but he represented District 30, I think it was at that point, which was Richland Township, Hampton, and Shaler, and I think Etna maybe too. He ran for the legislature in 2012, won, ran again in 2014 and won, ran again in 2016 and won. In 2018, he filed and then he withdrew. And a couple of us have talked to him. I know Connie Hester has, and basically he came to the conclusion that he could get a lot more done in his law practice than he could ever get done in the Pennsylvania legislature. And he just decided, what the heck with it? Why bother? And I can understand the why. What's the result of that? More than 4/5 or 80% of the Pennsylvania bills are never considered in committee. Now, of course, there are bills that probably shouldn't be considered. That's understandable. But that's an awful lot of bills introduced to just never be of any importance at all. And a number of those are bills that we really represented things that the voters wanted that were blocked by committee chairs. More than half of the bills passed in one chamber don't get a vote in the other chamber. Let's see, a good example is the bill, I'm trying to say. The bill about having radon, I think it's radon, no. What is it? It's, give me a minute. Oh, yes, carbon monoxide detectors in childcare facilities. Representative Wayne, I know perfectly well. Yeah, Fontana. Wayne Fontana has been introducing that bill in the Senate, Senator Wayne Fontana. I don't know, since 2013, I think is the number. And it gets passed unanimously, or at least in the last couple of sessions, in the Senate. Gets sent over to the House and it dies because the chair of the Health Committee doesn't want to bring that bill to the committee. So she doesn't. It's Kathy Rapp. Her excuses, well, I think there've been a number, something about costs. But I think in general, it may be that she simply doesn't care to bring up any bills that are introduced by Democrats. So this happens. Less than 7% of introduced bills make it to the governor's desk. And an even smaller percentage of that have a minority party sponsor. The average percent of bills enacted per session, well, you can see it's down in the single digits. Every one of those bills that is introduced and doesn't go anywhere has a cost. There is legal research and writing and drafting the bill. They have to make sure it's not in conflict with any other law or the conflict have to be resolved in the bill. They have to draft it into legal language. This takes effort. It takes people. Then it all has to be printed. And lots, it has to be printed lots, because there have to be copies for all the legislators, there's legislators, their staff. There have to be some available to the media and the public if they're requested. It's a lot of paper. And when you get all through with it, nothing is done with the bill. You've got to get rid of all that stuff. And disposal also costs money. So efficient and cost effective, which were two of our criteria, no way. What about a bill that the leadership favors, but maybe nobody else wants it? I can think of two examples. And they're both constitutional amendments, I know, which is another problem. But there was a constitutional amendment introduced in the last session, not this current session that's ending, but the previous one, to elect our appellate court members by districts instead of at large across the Commonwealth. And that would allow the legislature to gerrymander those districts. It passed last session with no expert testimony or public input. It flew under the radar. Nobody realized it was happening. However, since it was a constitutional amendment, it has to pass 2 sessions before it can be put on the ballot. And this session, we and a number of others found out about it. They had hoped to put it, to pass it really early in this session and get it on the May ballot and just do it the same way, let it fly under the radar. We found out about it. We raised an outcry. And even more important, the Bar Association found out about it. And they were really pissed. And they raised a lot of fuss. And that caused some Republican legislators to actually buck the leadership, which they don't do very often, and withhold their votes. And so it didn't pass, or wasn't even brought up, because the leadership can count. And if they don't, if they know they don't have the votes, they don't bring it up, they table it. But, and when I wrote this slide, I wrote it could still pass this session. I don't think it can now. I think it's dead. The session is over. But we had to keep an eye on it through these 2 years, because it could have happened. And then there's this constitutional amendment that they passed this year, which had 5 unrelated topics, including including that there's no constitutional right to an abortion, Pennsylvania, which I don't think I think it'll run into trouble in this next legislature. It won't get the second passage. And if it does, it may have the same problem that has come up in Kansas and a few other states. The voters will figure it out and won't pass it. But if the leadership favors something, they can just ram it through. Okay, interesting thing here. Between 27 and 2010, the Democrats controlled the legislature for a short amount of time. Look what happened. This is not a Republican problem. This is a politics problem. When the Democrats controlled the legislature, they did the same thing. Not the legislature, the House. They only controlled one chamber. They did the same thing. So it's, we can't blame it on one party. They did not, at that point, control the Senate. And the Senate went on doing the same stuff. And it got worse over toward recent past. Can you do it right? Well, there's an organization that rates legislative procedure fairness in state legislatures, Pennsylvania gets a 0 and Colorado gets a 100. And here's an example. In Colorado, they wanted to pass a redistricting reform along the lines that we tried to do in Pennsylvania. The legislators, and they wanted to do this. The legislators introduced bills in both houses in April of 2018. There were some amendments in committee. In May, 3 weeks later, no delay. It passed unanimously a week after that. Now, then you had to wait till a November election to have a voter referendum. So passed there with 71% of the vote. And I don't know why this keeps doing that, with 71% of the vote. It can be done. Our legislators could take a look at how Colorado, and they're not the only state that's good, Maine, that could operate. It doesn't have to be this way. So what issues are we not getting anything done on because of that? Now this slide was put together in August, so I'm not sure that there may be some of these that got some action, but not that I know of. But one of them is the gift ban, which the March on Harrisburg organization has been pushing for a long time. And that's gone nowhere. It was introduced as House Bill 1009, and it had 22 co-sponsors, bipartisan, 12 Republicans and 10 Democrats. It was referred to the State Government Committee, and it was passed by the State Government Committee and scheduled for the floor, and nothing happened, which is to say the majority leader decided that he didn't want that bill. One person. Another one, let's see. Well, I talked about the installation of carbon monoxide, and that's not on this. What was the other one that I wanted to talk to that was on this slide? Maybe there wasn't. Anyhow, these are some of the things that, at least as of August, Fair Districts was aware of having been introduced to the legislature and blocked. Here's a few others. Yeah, here's a few others that, and as I said, I was still editing this slideshow I stopped about 3 o'clock this afternoon, having done all I was going to do. But the carbon monoxide detectors in the child care centers, that passed the Senate unanimously and was blocked in the Health Committee of the House by, I think the chair is Kathy Rapp. Why any woman would not want the maximum protection from carbon monoxide in any place that children were is beyond my understanding, but that's what happened. Fire and emergency medical services have been losing volunteers, and they have been crying for some combination, some regionalization, so that they could get a better, be better effectively set up. It's not that somebody wants to impose this on those services. The services themselves want it. So that was Senate Bill 698, and it had 18 co-sponsors, 9 Democrats, 8 Republicans, and 1 independent, and it went nowhere. It was introduced, referred to the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Repair Committee, and got nowhere. Didn't get out of committee. And then there's fair standards for charter schools. Now, I know that there are some people in our education committee that are really concerned about charter schools, as they should be. There was a bill to amend the public school code to more tightly regulate those. It was 272, House Bill 272. It was introduced to the House Education Committee. Nothing happened. I don't know who the chair of that committee is. However, it had 75 co-sponsors. Now, more Democrats than Republicans, but some of each went nowhere. So that gives you an idea. And Senator Fontana also has been trying to get technical changes that would make it easier for the Pittsburgh Land Bank to address blight and get more properties rehabilitated and considering and contributing to the tax resources. And that's he's gone to the trouble of introducing an amendment to a bill that Republicans leadership wants to pass, and just asking if he could just attach this to that. And he says, I'm willing to do this, even though I know that I won't get any credit for it. Since his amendment, his name would not be on the bill in any way. And they still won't do that. And then there's red flags law. That's another one. And I have sort of an interest in community solar energy networks. That's a way of, if you put solar panels on your house and they produce some of your energy, if they produce more energy than you can use, you can feed it back into a network, and that works in an urban area where you have these electric utility networks. It doesn't work in rural areas, farm country, because they just don't have those networks, but they could set up smaller networks, community energy networks that would work the same way. Now, I understand there's a lot of support in rural areas, particularly from farmers who would really like to have this. Now, you would think that rural areas, which are largely Republican, would get this through, but apparently the leadership isn't interested. So anyhow, that gives you an idea. And then there's the bill that fair districts tried to get an independent citizens commission, and it had broad bipartisan support. It had more co-sponsors than any other bills in the House. At one point in one session, it had half the House as co-sponsors. It had resolutions of support. There are 24 counties. That's a lot of counties. It's not a lot of municipalities, but it takes a presentation, a lot of work to get them from the municipalities. That we got that many is interesting. It had a petition with many signatures. It had supportive letters and op-eds across the state. There were more than 900 public meetings attended by several thousand people. I spoke at a number of those, as did many other FDA fair districts people. And there was a poll that suggested that about 2/3 of public that citizens would support that. None of that mattered. Didn't make any difference. It got bottled up in the House State Government Committee, which was then chaired by Daryl Metcalf, if that's a name familiar to you. And there was a lot of, I'm not going to go into some of the machinations around that, but didn't matter. However, we raised a lot of consciousness with that process. We didn't change it, but we did get better maps. And how does that matter? Well, it means more districts are competitive. And that means we get more new legislators. And so hopefully that means we'll have more legislators resistant to surrendering their power and their voices to the party leaders. No guarantee of that. That's where we come in, try to make that happen. But conditions for change, we think, are more favorable now than ever. So what do we want? Well, the minimum that we want is three things. Bipartisan bills get a vote, one, in committee. No committee chair can block a bill. Bipartisan bills that are voted out of committee get a vote on the floor. The majority leader must introduce them. And if it passes one chamber, it must do the same in the other chamber. Can't be blocked in the second chamber. That's the minimum. And just to show you that that's the minimum, there are some other changes that Senators Lindsey Williams and Katie Muth suggested last session. One of them is equitable representation on standing committees. The margin in the House has never been that big. I mean, it's not, it's even, now it's almost non-existent, but on standing committees, they often had 7 from the majority party and 4 from the minority party. That's that's an overwhelming majority. It says that those committee members, minority committee members, really have zero say on anything. It shouldn't be that way. It should more or less follow whatever the margin is in the House as a whole. Committees have a minority chair as well as the majority chair, but that person has very little power. That person should be able to call hearings, to add legislation to the committee agenda. And there should be at least one minority committee member present to have a quorum. At 7 to 4, you could have a quorum without any minority committee members present. That should go away. And there should be adequate notice, public notice of committee actions. That would address the problem of pushing through bills that the leadership wants by flying under the radar. Okay, where do we go from here? Well, the first thing is we again have a petition, and there is a website. It's called fixharrisburg.com. I mean, you can remember that without having to write it down anywhere, probably. So a 5-minute job, go to that website and sign the petition. If you do nothing else. This slide was written before the election. Well, actually, this said candidates at that point. Some people could write letters to the editor. I'm not sure how much would get printed, but we could try that. Let's just tell them. There are meetings being set up to talk to legislators that have been elected about the rules and the processes, and to tell them about what we think, and to ask them, I mean, do you favor changing this? Would you prohibit amending the legislative rules as they do at the beginning of the session now? Do you agree that bipartisan bills should get votes in the committee, the floor, and both chambers? So we're in the process of communicating with legislators, especially new ones, and it's going to we've got a month to do something about it. Fair Districts is leaning away from asking people to vote no, and this is information I got at about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and asking really for more conversations in December to figure out how to ensure that bipartisan bills get a vote. In other words, they want to. I'm trying to take a more nuanced approach. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. This slide was added at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But it's more like doing everything you can to ensure that these things happen. And groups are being set up to do that. to talk to them. And if you're interested in joining one of those groups, I'd suggest that you get in touch with Connie Hester. And instead of being, you want to be very definite about these three things, but you also want to establish a more, how do I put it, a more nuanced aura. We want legislators to understand that what they do should work for us and not for their lobbyists and not for their donors, and that they need to work this out themselves. We can't.
17 more.
We want,
So more than halfway done.
they have to do it. We want rules that can be amended. If the first set of rules that they adopt don't quite work or have places that don't work, it shouldn't take till the next session to fix that. And then we want, our bipartisan support bills to get the votes that we want. We would like input from experts in legislative best practices. They should go look at Colorado. They should find out what actually is considered better than what they do, much better. And their examination of the rules and their work to set up new rules, which they should be doing, even if they adopt temporary rules at the beginning, should be bipartisan, and it should be transparent to the public. So that's all I have to say. Let's see.